Hariom, everyone. Welcome to our second day of Chinmaya Jayanti. Today, we will continue reflecting on Narada Bhakti Sutra. They are short statements on devotion by Naraji, and we will start with our Chinmaya Setukaris. We'll be reflecting on
them. Hariom. My name is Shri, and I will be reflecting on Sutra 27. So Sutra 27 goes like this. Ishvarasyapi bhamana dveshitvat dainya priyatvacha. And what that means is also because of God's dislike for egoism and because of his love for meekness, devotion alone is superior. And so the context within the Narada Bhakti Sutras that this sutra comes is in talking about the superiority of bhakti or bhakti yoga. And so 2 sutras previously, Naradaji says that bhakti is the greatest path, greater than karma yoga, raja yoga, and jnana yoga. And it's very interesting because I think we spend a lot of time in Chinmaya Mission in our satsangs, talking about jnana yoga and trying to learn more. And we also spend a lot of time talking about karma yoga. And then also the way Hinduism is shown in our society, we learn a lot about Raja Yoga, what Western people think about when they think of yoga. And so, there's so much focus on all of these paths. And, I was just thinking about why is bhakti superior? And so just really reflecting on that and, reading through this commentary and trying to internalize it. And the understanding that came to me, and it's expressed actually in the previous sutra, 26, is that bhakti is the nature of the fruit of these yogas. So when we think about these other karma yoga, what is the result of that karma yoga? The result of that karma yoga is that we were giving up all of the results of our actions to God. And then if we think about Raja Yoga or Jnana Yoga, in order to even start those, there's so much effort and preparation that goes into it. That the first step for Jnana Yoga is the sadhana chatushtaya. And we have to really prepare our minds to really calm down and to really focus on the viveka, vairagya, mind control, and mokshatma, to have that ability to even start the Jnana Yoga. And then Raja Yoga starts with yama and niyama, which is control, before we even get to the asana. So there's so many different steps of control, of purification to approach those paths. Whereas bhakti, all it takes is just love for God. And so it's such a more pure path and clear path that we can just start on. And so much of the focus of the other paths is just to get us into a state that bhakti automatically does. And so that superiority of bhakti becomes really clear to me. But then looking closely at this Sutra 27, on top of that, we see these 2 things about why bhakti is superior. One is Bhagavan's dislike of egoism, and the other is a love for meekness. And this dislike for egoism, one story that came to mind in thinking about this is the story of Rishi Vishwamitra. So Vishwamitra originally was a king, and he was a king, and he felt that everything in his kingdom should belong to him. That he had this royal ego, and he was a very powerful, strong warrior, and conquered and ruled his kingdom very, very powerfully, and felt that everything in his kingdom should belong to him. And in his kingdom there was another rishi, Vasishta, and Vasishta had this cow Kamadenu. And Kamadenu gives everything that you ask of it. It's a mythical cow that just fulfills every desire, and was owned by the sage Vashishta. And Vishwamitra, as a king, before he felt that, oh, it should belong to him. That I'm the king, anything the kingdom should belong to me. So he goes to Vasishta and says, I want your cow. I'm going to take it. And Vasishta says, no, this belongs to me. And because Vasishta, as a realized learned sage, does not, isn't using Kamadenu out of selfishness. It's using it to support his ashram and support the people and to fulfill the dharma, whereas the king, through his egoism, is going to use it out of his selfishness. And so Vasishta says, no, I'm going to defend this cow from your selfishness. And so Vishwamitra starts to fight him and gets soundly defeated. And then so he goes to the different devas and different people to try to say, oh, how can I become more powerful and defeat Vasishta? And they say, oh, you have to do this tapas and that tapas and this tapas. And he's willing to do everything, anything and everything, and becomes more and more powerful, but is still not able to defeat Vasishta. And then through that tapas, someone says, oh, you have to actually become equivalent to him in that power of becoming a Brahma Rishi. Then you'll be able to defeat him. And so he said, okay, let me focus on that. And through the tapas that it takes to become that learned of a rishi, to become that level of Brahma Rishi, he actually lets go of his egoism and then matches Vasishta, and then realizes, oh, wait, at this level, I don't actually need anything. And so that by losing that egoism, then he was able to become powerful enough to defeat to become the equal of Vasishta. And that Vishwamitra, after becoming the rishi, Brahma Rishi was the person who wrote the Gayatri Mantra. And so we see that dislike for egoism, that through that bhakti, through that that effort, he loses that egoism, and only then becomes who he was meant to be. And another story that showed me that love for meekness is Lord Shiva had a very powerful bow, and he wanted to give it to one of his devotees, and he wasn't sure who to give it to. And so he thought about it, and then he realized that, oh, I have two devotees right now that are probably the most deserving. One is Ravana. Ravana is a very ardent devotee of Lord Shiva, and prayed so much, but he was praying to Lord Shiva for power. And there's another king at the same time who was also an ardent devotee of Lord Shiva, who is King Janaka. And King Janaka is praying to Lord Shiva, but for wisdom and for how can I be the best ruler, and how can I be a realized king. And so the two of them had such different approaches to their bhakti and to their just the way they live their lives. And so in looking at these two devotees that were otherwise just the two greatest devotees of Lord Shiva at the time, Lord Shiva says, okay, I'm going to give this bow to Janaka. And of course, this is the bow then that King Janaka uses as part of the Swayamvara of Sita later on. And so these two stories, that are like prequels to the Ramayana, really helped me see what this sutra is trying to identify, which is that dislike for egoism and meekness is what makes a devotee better, or is what makes devotion the most powerful. So, but looking at that, and so then thinking more about, okay, how can I make this practical to myself? I think one thing that for me that I feel is that in a lot of the study that I feel, oh, I'm so smart, or I'm so, I've been attending these satsangs for years and years, and I've learned so much, and I can quote this, and I can tell this story and that. And I start to have this sattvic ego, for lack of a better term, but like this thing that, oh, I'm so great because I'm so learned or so, knowledgeable about this stuff. And reading this sutta really spoke to me that, oh, I have to keep that in check, because that that egoism is going to get in the way of my own growth. That if I feel like, oh, I know this, then I'm going to not pay attention maybe as much in the next class, or just not, do the sadhana that I need to do. And so having bhakti, or putting my love in something greater than myself, will force myself to say, oh, it's not me, it's something else. And so constantly thinking about something greater than myself will help me grow up, and is also part of the sadhana that I need to do every day. So so I thought this verse, really spoke to me, or the sutra really spoke to me in trying to grow myself to where I am, and to say, okay, then my next step, or continuous growth, is in developing this bhakti, so that I can limit my own egoism, and that this concept of this love for meekness, which also really interests me, because we often associate meekness with as a negative descriptor. That is, oh, meekness is weakness. But I think if we look at King Janaka was not a weak king, but he ruled with empathy, whereas Ravana ruled with fear. And that when someone and I'm learning this in my own career, through just the practical experience, that if I am willing to show that a willingness to learn, or a willingness to make mistakes and to own my mistakes, that I get more respect from my colleagues, or I become more approachable, and I can do my job more effectively. And so that's also something that I feel very practically in my day-to-day life, that reducing my own ego, and being okay with admitting a mistake, and okay with showing that I might not have all the answers all the time, helps people have trust in me, and that helps me have trust in others, and just to keep everything moving forward. And so that's, yeah, so overall that's my reflection on the sutra, to reduce our ego and to have that meekness.
Hari Om, everyone. Thank you, Shrikant. That was really wonderful. So today I have chosen Sutra number 48 to reflect upon. This sutra talks about, so we have this, we tend to know that how Maya is such a powerful thing, and this has super powering grip on us. So Devarshi Narada talked about a few conditions, how we can go beyond illusion or Maya, and I'm going to talk about a few of them through this sutra. So the sutra goes like this: Yeh karma phalam tyajati karmani sansayati tato nirdvando bhavati. So the first part is Yah karma phalam tyajati, meaning the one who relinquishes the fruits of action. The second part says karmani sansayati, the one who renounces all egocentric actions, tato nirvando bhavati. Therefore, by doing above two things, the one can become free from the play of opposites. So I'll try to break down this sutra in these three parts. So let's reflect upon the first part, which says detaching oneself from the anxiety to enjoy the fruit of action. So we tend to think a life from a very closer perspective, from the moment we born, or maybe after the adulthood, or maybe last 20, 30, 40 years. So we have just the memory of this life, but our life, our account of lives goes much more beyond that. Uh, so whatever results we expect today might be a combination of the karmas which we are doing today and the karmas which we have done in the past life. So this is an interesting concept of cause and effect, and how it works and how it keeps on going. So the karmas and the causes in the past will become the effects in the present. But whatever karmas we are doing today will have an effect in the future. So whatever task we are doing today, the result might be a combination of our present karmas as well as the result of our past karmas. So it's very misleading in believing that if we have done something to the best of our abilities, we will get fruits immediately. It can occur at any point of time in future. The fruits can occur at any period of time. So for example, when something very good or something really wonderful happened to us without even expecting, so that's also a fruit of our past karmas that we are ripening today. So similarly, when we attach ourselves to the fruit of action, first of all, we are not taking into account that there are many lives, and the account of those lives also will have an impact of these on those results. Also, if we think a lot about the fruits of our action, we just spend a lot of our mental energy not giving our best. We just think about the fruits and it just holds our mind. So so to to so there are many factors uh, which play an important role to define our results, but the karmas are actually in our action, are in our control, which we can do at the best of our abilities. So, and the second part says karmani sansayati, meaning we should renounce the I do mentality or the doership in our actions. So we tend to identify ourselves as BMI meaning body, mind, and intellect. But we are way beyond that. That's not our true identification. That's merely an instrument to perform all the actions. And this doership in the actions come when we think that, okay, this is related to my body, or my mind is making me do all these things. But that's not true. That's just an instrument which is given by Supreme to do all the activities. So I think we should not get attached to our BMI and think of our true self. And when we go beyond our BMI, body, mind, and intellect, we tend to see our pure selves, and we will be able to renounce all the doership and egoship in our actions. And the third part says, when we detach ourselves from the fruit of our actions and when we renounce the doership in the actions, we become free from the play of opposite. Free of the opposite nature, meaning the duality in things. Like we have this fleeting personality of experiencing failure or success, happiness, unhappiness, honor, dishonor. And this is very fleeting. It changes very, like it just stays for a short period of time. Like happiness stays just for a very short period of time and then just goes away. Because again, when we try to get attached to worldly objects, and when we try to think ourselves as a product of BMI, then all those things happens. But when we see our true self, our true nature is like Supreme, that is equilibrium, always the joy state, always be in the happiness state. So when we give those two things, then we really detach ourselves from our bodily needs or BMI needs, and then we can actually learn to be self. So there is a Gita phrase which describes this part so well. Your right is to work only, but never to its fruits. Let not the fruits of action be your motive, nor let your attachments to be inaction. So Gita teaches us wonderfully to avoid any wasteful expenditure of mental energies on fruit of actions and to work instead to the best of our abilities, dedicating our efforts to a noble cause. And we can also understand this by using an example surrounding us. For example, imagine a tree. A tree produces such a good fruits for us, but we just go and take them and we become very happy. But if the fruit is very attached, if the tree is very attached to its fruit, the tree will feel like the disappointment that people are taking them away. I have given my best, but still I cannot enjoy my own fruits. So we should be like a tree that it has done its best to give us the best fruits, but not attachment to the fruits. Similarly, when we look at birds, like they sit on a branch and sing beautifully, they don't care that, okay, some people are praising it or not, or they're paying attention to it not. It's just that they enjoy doing their karmas. So I think we should be like those things where we are actually enjoying our actions rather than thinking about results. So this phrase is particularly closer to my heart because I am in general a very anxious person, whether it's a very small to like small day-to-day activity or something big coming up in my life. So and yet I'm very hardworking, but still I used to be very anxious. But when I thought about this, when I listened about this phrase and paid a little more attention, I realized that because I was always looking at the end goal or end result. I wasn't paying, I was paying too much attention to the goal that I was not able to enjoy my journey towards reaching there. So I think that's why I used to spend a lot of my mental energy on thinking about the results, not giving my best to the karmas. So when that's done, we can be on a true bhakta mark because we will always be in a pure dedication, surrendering ourselves to the God. We will be always thinking about Him before doing any action, and to think about our kartavyas and duty to perform any actions. And we will be in a great connection with God by dedicating all our fruits of actions or like the actions to Him directly. So and this I can experience at all the moments of my life, like every small moment, every big moment. I can follow this and be a little closer to being a seeker in the world. And I read these beautiful lines somewhere, that like some of us might not have the correct understanding of what success is. We always think success as a desired result, but actually success is not in the result or desired outcome, but success is in your endeavors, efforts, and intention. When we think this way, results become inconsequential and action become its own reward and motive. Hari Om.
Hari Om. My name is Nitya, and today I'll be speaking on Sutra 33 in the text Narada Bhakti Sutra. So this sutra goes as Tasmat Saiva Grahya Mumukshubhihi. So the literal translation of the sutra is, therefore, that supreme love for God alone is to be sought after by seekers of complete liberation. So in reflecting on this sutra, I think it's important to go back to some of the prior sutras. So this is in this section of the text called Para Bhakti Extolled. So talking about where does this devotion come from? How does one inculcate or get this type of devotion? And the sutras talk about 3 different ways that are differ than what is said in Sutra 33. One says devotion comes through knowledge, that it is that knowledge which helps one devote themselves. The second one says it's mutual dependence. Knowledge requires devotion and devotion requires knowledge. that you know what you're devoted to and you're devoted to what you know. And the last one says that devotion is the fruit itself. So these are three different ways that various rishis expound on where devotion comes from. However, in the text, Narad Muni or Narad Ji, as well as Puja Gurudev, expound on why that may not actually be the case. They give this example of a dinner. So you go to dinner, whether it's your own dinner or a dinner at someone else's home, you might have knowledge that you're getting dinner, but that itself won't lead to satiation. Even if you know how the ingredients are mutually dependent on each other or how they're going to blend together, that also is not going to lead to you ultimately having the outcome of having eaten the dinner. And lastly, you don't get the fruits of the dinner or experience that satiation and contentment till you actually eat it. So it is not merely the fruit itself. So through this, Narad Muni is saying, yes, while these make sense, this is not the complete picture of where devotion comes from. That's why he says, devotees must seek supreme love for God alone. And it is that supreme love which requires devotees' intensity and actual involvement, which is what will lead to that love and devotion. And it was interesting because in the commentary, Puja Gurudev, as well as in the Sutra, Narad Muni lay out who is fit to walk this path. And Gurudev talks about, it is one who knows their imperfections. One who realizes like this personality, my likes, my dislikes, the various vasanas, these are far from perfect. And it's someone who's impatient, who's eager to say, I want to absolve myself of this. And one who realizes that this isn't it. This world that I'm living in, the sensory world of objects, emotions, thoughts, all these circumstances are actually not giving me that contentment that I thought I would gain from the sensory world. It is someone who has that realization and that want to truly liberate themselves from their personality and their individuality. Those who have that mumukshutva. Gurudev talks about how it requires someone who is willing to sacrifice and be a hero to walk on this diligent path of devotion. And that word diligent, I think, is what made me pause. Because initially, I think often when I think about the path of bhakti or the path of devotion, it can feel maybe more of a softer path. It's about devotion. It's about emotion and feeling and your relationship with the Lord, which it absolutely is. But at the same time, in this sutra and in the commentary, actually, it's about much, much more than that. And Gurudev writes, it requires the courage of Prahlada, the conviction of Dhruva, the heroism of Sudama, the depth of Shabari, the perseverance of the gopis, the ardor of Radharani, and the faith of Kunti. And each of these, when we look at each of these bhaktas and the way they have truly devoted themselves to Bhagavan, one almost can kindle that devotion in themselves when reflecting on that, when reflecting on those devotees and their stories. So when looking at one devotee, the story of Dhruva is very inspiring. Dhruva is a 5-year-old little boy. Picture that. This is like a little kindergartner or a little 5-year-old boy who all he wants to do is sit in his father's lap, King Uttanapada's lap. But he's told his mother is Suniti and his brother's mother is Suruchi. And Suruchi says, no, you may not sit on the king, your father's lap. In fact, you must pray to the Lord that you're born to me in my womb in another life, and only then can you sit on your father's lap. And Dhruva is very sad. When you're that little, you're that young, often the deepest love that you know is that of your parents. And in that moment, all he wanted to do was sit on his dad's lap. And here I think it's interesting because if you think about the deeper meaning of the story, Dhruva wants to sit on his dad's lap, but is not allowed to. But in fact, Bhagavan wants to enclose us and have us be at his feet, at the Lord's feet and in his lap. And often we are the ones who say we don't want to do that. And Dhruva then goes to his mother Suniti. And Suniti says she has the true Viveka and actually tells her son, this 5-year-old, that yes, the Supreme Lord is your father. Go and seek out your father. So then he goes out and she says, this Supreme Father loves you unconditionally. So then Dhruva, the small boy at mere 5 years old, he's full of energy and tapasya and focus on the Lord. So he sets out to the forest. He goes to the forest and wants to meet Bhagwan. And many people that he encounters ask him, you're young, you're 5 years old. Why don't you just go back? This is not that big of a deal. But in fact, he stays steadfast on his path. Almost similar to Hanumanji in the story when crossing the ocean to get the Sanjeevani. So in this, Dhruva ends up actually getting the guidance from his guru, from Narada Muni himself, and ultimately is able to, with his devotion and forbearance and focus and conviction, actually gets the darshan of the Lord, of Lord Narayana. And this story of Dhruva, this example is one of many examples of these great devotees and these great bhaktas who have this steadfastness. They have this depth, conviction, and ultimately faith in the Lord. That is what guides them to gain this supreme love for the Lord, which, as in the Sutras noted, is what seekers need to do who strive for liberation. So in thinking about this, it's interesting. I was thinking about how you apply this in your life. I think cultivating this bhakti is a process. And I came up with kind of a framework with 3 A's: authenticity, adoration, and absoluteness. So first, when I think about devotion or the path of bhakti, often it requires being very authentic with the Lord at the start of forming that relationship. In self-unfoldment, it actually says, surrender your imperfections at the feet of the Lord. And I think that actually, that's a really important first step, because often, I know sometimes for me, I'm like, am I really at my best right now? Can I really form this deep relationship with Bhagwan, with the Lord, knowing what I know about my imperfections? But really, Bhagwan is the absolute and ever accepting of all his devotees. So it's important for us to shed that, be authentic, and start surrendering those imperfections. Then once we do that, I think the second A is adoration. And here I think about it through the lens of how one devotes themselves or worships. It reminds me of, we studied the text Upadesha Sara a few years ago with the other chicks in Setukaris. And in it, there's a verse that says, Kayavan mana karyam uttamam pujanam japas chintanam kramat. So here, you can figure, you know yourself. How do you want to adore and worship the Lord? Is it puja? Whether it's a 4-step, 16-step, or even more elaborate puja, to really feel that oneness with the Lord? Or is it japa? Is it that japa and that repetition of the Lord's name? Or is it something where it's just chintanam? Or even beyond that, that contemplation of the Lord? I think it's going from that authenticity to then that adoration, where you're able to truly feel that sense of closeness with the Lord, both in terms of the form and formless. And through this process, really ultimately getting to that absoluteness, or that last A, which is talking about that supreme bhakti, or that supreme love for the Lord. Because at the end of the day, in order to go beyond the mind, we need to have that beautiful mind that feels that oneness. And that comes from that surrender. That comes from that prayer with that pure heart, where devotion ends up manifesting itself as oneness between our personalities as devotees and Bhagwan becoming one. And I think really that is what moved me about this verse. When thinking about how you apply it and how you start developing that deep, supreme love and devotion, I think it really shows the power of prayer. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna, Bhagavan Krishna says, those who worship me with devotion are in me, and I am also in them. There is this oneness that is at play, no matter where you are in your journey as a seeker, or as a devotee. And I think the other thing that moved me about this verse is that it showed that bhakti is one of the most inclusive paths. Yes, it requires that steadfast conviction and courage from those bhaktas that were noted earlier in the commentary, including that of Dhruva. But at the same time, each and every one of us can grow our love for the Lord. And I think often when I think about myself, or even in this path as a spiritual seeker, it's easy to say, can I do that? Is this possible? Is growing this level of depth and devotion really possible? And will Bhagavan truly accept me and love me? And I think the answer to that is yes. Because in Gita chapter 9, Bhagavan says at the end of verse 31, Kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. Know for certain, O Kaunteya, that my devotee is never destroyed. So really, when thinking about this whole concept of supreme love for the Lord and devotion, it is possible. Each of us has the ability to really inculcate that supreme love for the Lord in our heart, and to realize that through that love, through that firm abidance in the self, one can truly see that it is possible, that is the path, that devotion, that true love, that is truly the path for liberation and that abidance in the self. So that is what I wanted to share today on Sutra 33. Hari Om.
Hari Om, everyone. My name is Aditya, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Sutra 19 today. So Sutra 19 says, Nada dastu tat arpita akhila acharata tat visparane param vyakulata iti. The Gurudev has translated this as the following. He says that that according to Deva Rishi Narada, total dedication of all actions at the altar of the Lord and excruciating pangs at all moments of forgetfulness of the Lord is supreme love, divine bhakti. So the sutra here, it gives an overall, it's a brief, but it's an overall encompassing definition of bhakti. So if we go back to this first half of the sutra where it says that bhakti is the total dedication of all actions at the altar of the Lord, just for context, earlier sutras talk about different ways we can kindle this love divine, this bhakti for Bhagavan. Doing things like chanting Bhagavan's name, listening to Bhagavan's leelas, contemplating upon Bhagavan in the heart. So one thing that came to mind was the famous verse from the Bhagavatam, where Prahlad Maharaj tells Hiranyakashipu, his father, about Navada Bhakti, or this 9-pointed Bhakti, which is a very famous verse, which many of us know, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Padasevanam, Arjanam, Bandhanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atma Nivedanam. So which translates to, the 9 steps of devotion are listening to the Lord's glories, singing his glories, remembering his name, serving his lotus feet, worshiping his form, praising and adoring him, being his servant, being his friend, and ultimately merging into his lotus feet, into his holy feet. So given that everyone has sort of different psychological makeup, Prahlad Maharaj here gives us, shows that there's different avenues towards offering worship to Bhagavan. So no matter what sort of predispositions you may have, there's certainly no dearth of bhakti-oriented actions that one can take to offer this worship and to cultivate this bhakti. But the genius of Gurudev here is that he extracts an even deeper meaning from this sutra. So certainly you should do these actions by all means, but Gurudev further on sort of presses on and says, that the exhortation of the sutra is that you should dedicate all activities. So this includes these sacred activities that we just discussed here, but also even our day-to-day activities. So if our day-to-day activities can also be offered to Bhagwan, then what this essentially means is that our connection to Bhagwan is not limited solely to our sadhana or our puja room. So, we hear this word kirtan, for example, kirtan being the musical recitation of Bhagwan's names, or maybe Bhagwan's lila also. So, but Gurudev actually says in the commentary to chapter 9, verse 22 of the Gita, that kirtan is not solely the musical recitation of Bhagwan's name, but actually, and I'm paraphrasing him here, where he says it's an even more potent form of kirtan. It's a steady flow of love and a silent act of the mind, which is a result actually of this appreciation of this ideal or this form of Bhagwan that one has learned to glorify. So, Bhagavan Krishna actually echoes this same teaching here in the sutra in chapter 9, verse 27 of the Bhagavad Gita, where it says, Yat karoshi yad ashnasi yad johosi dadasi yat tapasyasi kanteya tat kurushva madal pranam. Whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer in sacrifice, what you give in charity, whatever you practice as austerity, O Kanteya, do it as an offering unto me. So the teaching here is very clear that we are not independent of Bhagavan, nor should we be. So all of our actions ideally should be directed towards Bhagavan. And as I was thinking about this, I thought, even conversely, even the actions that we consciously do not engage in that would break our connection to Bhagavan would also be an offering. So for example, if one has taken a sankalpa that every morning one has to rise early, bathe and do japa before getting on with the day, eating breakfast, whatever. Imagine it's winter in New York, it's 10 degrees outside and your bed is very warm. The point is that by fighting against this tamasic tendency to stay in bed and getting up and doing what you're supposed to do, not only is doing the japa the offering it to Bhagavan, but also even making the effort to fight against this tamasic tendency is also the offering as well, part of it. So basically, Gurudev actually says that all acts of perception and all of our reactions should be a devout offering unto him. And this is a quote, he said that this offering, everything being an offering unto Bhagwan, it's not an unnecessary make-believe or a mere fancied exaggeration. The oneself revels everywhere. To remember the self during all transactions of life is to remember the substratum. So, many of us lament, and I certainly do, that if only I had more time to dedicate towards spiritual activities, I would. But, realistically, all of us have a few minutes of idle downtime to do spiritual activities rather than scrolling on our phones or watching YouTube or something. So, but, I was thinking one thing that I've started implementing in my own life is simply the act of cooking and eating. Certainly, we all eat every day. We may not cook every day, but we certainly eat. So if we start, cooking we have this bhav or this mood of we are cooking for Bhagwan, we are offering the food to Bhagwan and then eating that food as prasad. This is a very easy way to start this constant connection with Bhagwan at least 3 times a day. So, we all know the verse from Gita about how Bhagwan says that one can offer him a leaf, flower, fruit, or water, and he will accept it if it's offered with a pure mind, full of devotion. So the articles that are listed in the shloka about a flower, fruit, leaf, these are easily available. So Bhagwan is not really looking for these material articles of worship necessarily. I mean, after all, what can we offer to Bhagwan that he doesn't already have? What is opulence and what is opulent compared to his own self-effulgent opulence? So Bhagwan is actually emphasizing that the sadhaka should be pure-minded and possessed of devotion. So to work towards this pure-mindedness, this chitta shuddhi, one should engage with the mind that all of one's actions, whether they're sacred or secular, are to be offered at the altar of Bhagwan. And this is how we can actualize this chitta shuddhi. So the second half of the sutra talks about bhakti is that state where if one becomes forgetful of the Lord in any moment, one will experience excruciating pangs. So when a true bhakta actually, realizes that his or her mind has wavered from Bhagawan, this is not really due to any sort of like moralistic shame necessarily. Rather it's more that this remembrance of one's forgetfulness evokes like a sort of like a deeper sense of displacement. Gurudev writes that it's kind of like a fish out of water. Just when they struggle for breath if it's not in the water. In the later sutra, in this, I think it's like Sutra 21, the Sutrakar, he evokes the gopis of Vraja as being the embodiments of this ultimate bhakti. So they had their normal secular lives. They took care of their homes, took care of their children, took care of their husbands. But yet their mind, they continually were contemplating Bhagawan, who was, their very source of joy. And, they, even in the Bhagavatam, when Bhagavan Krishna is telling Uddhava that when the gopis are overwhelmed with these intense feelings of separation, they faint out of bewilderment. So it's no wonder, actually, that a gopi who even experienced a single moment of forgetfulness of Bhagavan would feel existentially displaced. So the thing is that one thing I've noticed in my life, why I really liked the sutra is because, and then bringing up this idea of the gopis as being these perfect embodiments of bhakti is because, sometimes I've felt, especially in the past, when I get overwhelmed with work and personal life, I say, I just want to renounce all of this and just leave and just go to some isolated place and just take to spiritual life. But, one thing I realized as I've gotten older is that, if you want to escape sort of the noise of the city, and yet you have a lot of noise in your mind, renouncing the world is not going to do anything, because in that isolated ashram that you're sitting in, that noisy mind that was once a nuisance in the city is now going to be deafening in this isolated area, because now you don't have the other things that were at least distracting you. So we should just strive to be like the gopis, who constantly remembered Bhagavan in every moment. So what I took away from this sutra is that bhakti is not a compartmentalized activity. It's not really meant just for a few minutes in the morning or on a certain festival. It's actually meant for in every action that we do. We should be thinking to ourselves, how does this bring me closer to Bhagavan? So these acts of devotion should not just purely be outward. Gurudev has actually written where he says that one should not, in that same chapter 9 verse 22 verse about how Bhagavan Krishna says, my devotees are always singing my glories. Gurudev writes in the commentary that one should not engage in these outward activities of bhakti only to return and to what he calls the same dens of vices. So overall, we should just make firm resolves to not engage in sort of any destructive behaviors. We should always try to remember Bhagavan in every moment, and then our entire lives can and ideally should be expressions of love for Bhagavan. Thank you. Hari Om.
Hari Om, everyone. Pujya Gurudev Swami Chinmayananda was very smart, very intelligent. He never had to think of the answers of any question anybody asked, and people ask him all the time some question. He had tremendous examples, and we can't think of or even copy the examples that he used to give. One day, one devotee talked to him and said, I have a bad habit. I play cards. So Gurudev said, oh, okay, no big deal. You don't have to give up your vices. Even if you want to give up your vices, the vices won't leave you. And the guy is amazed. Are you telling me to continue my vices? He said, wait, that's not what I said. Then he said, I'll give you an example. Do you know how to clean the spittoons? So if you work in a TB hospital or the places where the sick patients are there, every bed has a spittoon. So they have to keep spitting all day. Next morning, when the round is going on, the doctor looks at it. And then he said, okay, I'm done. Go ahead, clean it. And the nurses said, we'll go and take the spittoon and put a new one there. The question is how to clean it. What do we think all the time? Oh, it's easy. Take a sponge, put some soap, and scrub it, clean it, done. No, you don't do that. Especially when he was young, the things were not available every place. So the way to clean spittoon is to flush it with water. And more you flush, more and more spit comes out and cleans the pot. That's the way to clean the spittoon. So he said, I want you to do the same thing. What? He can't get it. He said, listen, cultivate new good habits. So when you cultivate more and more new good habits, and what are those good habits? Nishkam karma, yoga, meditation, charitable activities, distribution of wealth, and help anybody, whichever way they need the help from you, help the society. If you develop good habits, your bad habits will disappear. It will be less and less important in your life. It's so simple. And we keep always worrying about how can I stop smoking? How can I going out to the restaurant, enjoy, spend money? How can I stop buying jewelry and suits and everything? Well, those things are not important in life. So you don't have to worry about it. Just do good things, the right things, and automatically the bad habits disappear. One day, another such person went to Swamiji, very good, suited, nicely dressed, educated, learned person. And he said, Swamiji, I don't believe in God. What is this God? Well, I mean, he hides behind the cloud. He judges me, you, everybody. And then either he punishes us or rewards us. Well, what kind of God is that? Why do I have to believe in God? Oh, Swamiji said, you know, I am looking for a person like you. Let's have a little talk. Okay, tell me, what did you eat breakfast? Oh, usual. I had some toast and coffee and omelette, and sometimes I get potatoes, sometimes I don't. Okay, so where does that eggs come from? Oh, hens. Where do the hens come from? Eggs. Where did that eggs come from? Hens. Where did the hens come from? Eggs. Then they both decided we can continue for the rest of the evening. So let me cut short. Okay, the first egg or the first hen came from where? He didn't have the answer. So Swamiji gave the answer. It comes from God. When God created, nothing was there. And now you see around and see the whole universe, the people, the objects, the buildings, and the earth, and the planets, and the stars, and everything came out. It came out from where? Nothing. He said, no, it cannot be nothing. Because for every effect, there must be a cause. And when the first effect came out, there is a cause. That cause is Bhagavan. Now you get it, what that Brahman is? That is the power, that is the entity. That was never born, is always there, very powerful, knows everything, illumines the whole universe, self-effulgent. Now guess when you die, when this whole world dies, and when the pralaya comes, the universe is gone, who will be left? The God, the Brahman. And we can imagine they had a long conversations, and he got the idea of what Gurudev said. And he never left Gurudev, he never left Chinmaya mission. One another story is about two ants. And this story Gurudev said, there is a salt hill ant and a sugar mill ant. These two ants were talking to each other. And the salt hill ant says, I don't enjoy food. There is no fun. And the sweet sugar mill ant says, I love food. I eat all day. You have to taste my food. It's incredible. Why don't you come and try? And well, that ant tried. He said, yeah, I like it. It's sweet. But there's something not right, you know? Said, okay, go. Wash your mouth. Your mouth has little pieces of salt in it. Clean your mouth. Come back. And then taste my sugar. And that ant came back. Oh, this is fantastic. I love it. What did Gurudev mean actually? Is that those little speckles of salt means the leftover fears, leftover limitations, leftover disappointments in us. Wash them out, clean them out, and you will enjoy the world. You will enjoy the food, you will enjoy the sugar, and you will enjoy the Vedanta. Now you study. So remove your shortcomings, try with an empty head, learn from the beginning, enjoy it. There is a lot of things to be learned from Vedanta. This is his point. So I want to thank all four speakers, Shrikant, Mansi, Nitya, and Aditya. It was wonderful. And good night to everybody. Please come back tomorrow at 7 o'clock. Hari Om. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.